Today we're going to discuss raising a reader, how to foster a love for books. My name is Melissa Rohan. I am the principal of Waterfront Academy, which is a dual language, English-Spanish Montessori school in the Catholic tradition. We start at preschool and we go all the way up through 8th grade, following the Montessori curriculum. And we do these workshops. We try and do them monthly. Last month we were scheduled to do screens and children. And so we're going to do the virtual version of that one next week. But generally speaking, I like to do one a month. It's relatively quick. So when we do them in person, they're about an hour long. But I try and get the virtual one quicker. And because I am recording this, I will stop the recording before the Q&A. I just ask that between now and the Q&A, I just kind of run through this, and then I'm happy to answer all the questions after. So let's go ahead to the next one. So today we're going to talk about the foundations of pre-reading skills. So I'm going to be basically the age ranges I'm covering is all the way from toddlers through about 3rd grade, more or less. What I am not, and I want to be very specific, and what I cannot talk about is any specific or reading issues. This is more on a generalization, and there's really wonderful reading specialists out that can answer and focus on more reading challenges. But this is really just more of a generalization and talk about what we do here at Waterfront Academy and what you might see in a Montessori program. So, foundations of pre-reading skills. So this would be skills that we'd like to see in children before we start the reading. Writing and the path to reading. So this would be what we would see next. And so pre-reading, I would say skills would be like toddlers and like the beginning of primary. Writing, we would see more in primary, and then some reading strategies and tools. We're looking at the end of primary and into elementary. And then making reading fun, that's more of the lower elementary. Foundations for pre-reading skills. So some of the things that we do is we really start really young, making sure that the children know to read or to do things left to right. And so we're training the brain to move left to right. So some of the things that you might see in the classroom, or some of the works that you might see that would start training that brain, that left to right movement. And granted, if you were in, let's say, China or Japan, in a Montessori environment, it would look differently because or in Israel, their writing is different. And so they don't have the left to right. So they would do things differently. But in here in the United States with English, or if you're in a Spanish speaking country, it would be left to right training of the brain. So some things you might see in the classroom would look like you would have your shelves and they would be organized left to right, top to down. In the um, in the works that we're doing left to right. So in the hands-on practical life work, we work left to right, and then we move the materials and then work left to right again. So we're training that left to right for the brain, so that the brain will automatically move in that direction. So another thing that we look at and work on is sound awareness. So really young children, and Dr. Montessori talks about this in her writing, music is considered pre-reading skill, right? So she would have her bells and she would work with the children in like identifying which one's low, which one's high, and with big intervals and smaller intervals, um, and like work on which ones are letter C, which ones are letter note D, right? And so she would be able to do that. And what that is doing is training the brain to be vigilant in listening to different sounds. Another activity that you can do at home is if you're outside, you sit still with your child and you listen. I'm actually not even outside, I'm inside, and I can hear a bird chirping outside. Yeah. And I hear a door of a car outside this way. So you would have that kind of sitting still and listening and trying to figure out what we can hear, right? So that would be another way of doing sound awareness with a much younger child. Um, so another thing that we can do is hand-eye coordination. So we do a lot of that in practical life. You can do it at home. Is we're pouring things, we are transferring things with a spoon. These are ways to like get that hand-eye coordination to happen in the brain. And we're vocabulary building. So what does that look like at home? Definitely reading to your child. Um, Narrating things that you do at the home or at the grocery store or while you're driving. So, for example, if you're driving, oh, look at the train. Oh, there's an eagle flying. Do you see the eagle flying? Look at that huge tree. Right? The red car. How many red cars can you find? That kind of a thing. Or if you're at the grocery store narrating, oh, well, it looks like we're going to need 5 eggplants for our eggplant casserole. I don't know. And you start pulling out the eggplants or the potatoes or, asking questions. What do you want to eat? What do you want to drink? What do you want for dinner? Oh, I like whatever. So having a lot of conversations, even before the child is pre-verbal, you want to keep talking and what the child is doing is the child is looking straight at your face and looking how you're forming all the words with your mouth. And they're also connecting um, vocabulary with the thing. They're also looking at intonation and how we're structuring our sentences. There's a lot of things that they're learning by us talking to the child, and we're building that vocabulary for them, which is extremely important. So those are some of the things that I would say right from the very beginning that you can do at home, and some of the things that you would see in a Montessori program. The next thing is the path to reading. In a Montessori environment, we actually start with writing, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's really very, very smart because if the child can write it, the child can read it. And one of the things that we've seen at other schools is a lot of memorizing of words, and that's not helping them read. Um, so if we're writing the words out, even if it's incorrect, they are learning phonics and they're going at their own pace, right? And so it's when you have a child who's memorized words, it's really hard to identify what they do and what they don't know as far as how to read. So if we start with the phonics and we start with the writing, it's much easier to progress later on. And so we do start with writing before reading. We introduce the symbols and the sounds, not the symbols and the name of the symbol. No, We do the symbol with the sound. So for example, if you have the letter A symbol, you would say A or B or K, right? So we do the symbol first. So introducing symbols to sounds. Um, so we would do that. The other thing that we would do is the three finger grip, right? So since we do writing before we do reading, we need to make sure that their writing hand is strong enough because once they get going, they don't want to stop. And if they don't have the developed muscles or the muscle strength to handle it, it's extremely frustrating. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, but let me go ahead and introduce it right now. That reading is a tool. Reading and writing is a tool that humans made, no different than, let's say, a bicycle. And so it's not an intuitive tool, right? And so it's a skill that we have to learn. And as soon as it gets frustrating, it becomes extremely hard to get past it. So we need to make sure always that our children are uh, properly prepared for each new skill so we are not setting them up for failure. So we work a lot with three finger grips ahead of even writing. And so things that you can do is scissor cutting, tearing cardboard, really anything that they can do with fine motor skills. And there's a whole lot of things on the internet to help with coming up with really great ideas. Clay, like Play-Doh, baking and kneading the dough, wringing washcloths, folding socks together. Things like that really strengthen those little hands and those fingers so that they can have a three finger grip so that when they do start writing, they don't get frustrated. Sensorial learning, that's the other thing is that when we start bringing in the sounds, we do it with sandpaper letters, for example, or a sand tray. And there's a lot of really great ways to add that sensorial piece to it. And there's a reason why we do that. And that's because if your hands are doing the work, it takes up more brain activity in your head, in the child's head. So if the child is doing the sensorial work, it's activating far more neurons than if it was just like, here's the letter A, and we're going to say ah, right? Or ah, excuse me. So we activate the hands so that we can get more of the neurons engaged. Um, then we start with, after we do that, we start building on CVC words and we begin with the beginning letter sounds. So we have a couple of activities that we do in our classroom with beginning letter sounds. For example, so we do CVC, which is consonant, vowel, consonant, like cat, C-A-T. The beginning letter sound is the k sound, right? So we might have a box of like little objects. They love little objects. And we'll bring out the little miniature cat and we'll say cat. And we'll ask them to identify the beginning letter sound, k, k, k. Or we might have a group of um, different miniature objects and we'll ask the child to pick out the item that begins with the k, k, k sound. Um, so that is what we would do with the C. And once they have the beginning letter sound, then it becomes easy for them to identify the ending consonant sound. So if we can do the beginning, then we might find, oh, what ends with the t, t, t sound, right? And then they can get the T part. So we're not even writing yet, right? And we're not reading yet. We're still dissecting the CVC words. And then once we have the beginning letter sound and we have the ending letter sound, we can start working on the middle, on that vowel, that middle vowel. Um, we love doing games. Dr. Montessori has so many different uh, works, and it'll say like the snake game or the bank game, right? A lot of our materials have game in it. And so we like playing games with the children, and that's one of the best ways for all humans, young or old, to learn is through a game. And so one of the fun ones that you can do at home is I Spy. But instead of saying I spy something green, you might say I spy something that begins with the letter t, 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 or the sound t, t, t. And then they can find tree, traffic sign, tacos, I don't know, right? Um, and then they can come up with all the different sounds or words that begin with the t sound. Um, and then when you're reading at home with your child, one of the things that we always ask the parents to do is interactive reading. And there's a lot of reasons for this. But we also, one of the big things that sometimes we notice with children is they will read, but they don't understand what they're reading. And so we need to give them clues so that the goal isn't just to read everything. The goal is to learn and understand what they're reading. Um, and so what we might do in a big picture book is before we even read a word on the page, we would say, "Oh, look at what do you see in the pictures? What do you think this page is going to be about? What do you want to learn? What did we already learn in the page before? What do you think we're going to learn on this page?" A lot of just questions like that to try and get them to start thinking in that way, so that when they are readers, they are the goal for them isn't just to get from point A to point B, but the goal is to read for understanding and for learning. So that is where we are with our toddlers and our really young primary students. Then we start moving into some reading strategies and tools. So when we start writing and when we start reading, we're gonna, like I said, start with the CVC words for writing. And then for reading, once they've got the CVC words, we're gonna start working on some books because they get so excited to read their first book. That's a very big moment, just like tying their own shoe. So we really like the Bob books because they're very nicely done with the pictures and understanding the phonics and the reading. We really, really enjoy, and they're very accessible. They're at the libraries, they're at Amazon, they're at the bookstores. Everybody's got the Bob books, so it's extremely accessible. They're not super expensive. So we really do love those, but there's others out there. So I would just make sure it's something that is appropriate and on level and never, I really would strongly discourage you from moving them faster than they're ready to go. Again, because we don't want to frustrate anybody. Um, and always, like I mentioned before, the phonics approach is the way to go. Once they've got the first few, we actually really don't introduce the memorized words until elementary. And we do have some lists of just words that you just have to memorize. And we go through them, but we really kind of wait and push it off a little bit. They're gonna pick it up anyways. Like they're gonna pick up the pretty quickly because it's in all of these Bob books and things, and they're just gonna know to memorize the. But yeah, that's kind of I would really, really like strongly stick to the phonics approach. Um, Sounding out each letter, using your finger as you sound them out are really important. If they have a hard time with their finger, just grab a bookmark and put it under there and use the finger at the same time to go across the line. Um, And like I said, managing frustration. And it's not just the child's frustration, it's sometimes the adult's frustration too. It's okay to put something down and come back to it, instead of forcing something that just isn't going to happen at that moment. English is language, not just English. Language is something that we learn in our sleep. And so um, sometimes we just need to walk away and have a good night's sleep and come back when we're ready. Um, so breaks are extremely important, and it really needs to be a positive experience. Generally speaking, we talk to parents about not about what kind of praises to use with the children. This would be an example of where a lot of positive words of encouragement are going to be really, really important. Things like, um, I see what you did there, sounding it out. Um, that would be really good. Or you wouldn't say, oh, you're such a great reader, because then it's not really encouraging them to continue trying. So just making sure that they are being encouraged. We actually we had a funny situation. We were teaching a primary student to read, and man, he wanted to read and he wanted it badly. Oh my goodness, you could sense it. It was so visceral experience. And and then once he learned to read his first word, he like stood up and walked away. And we're like, wait a minute, where are you going? He's like, I'm done. I'm good. And it was very clear he didn't need to read anymore. He mastered it. And it was just a funny experience. But like that would be an example of like if they feel that they've mastered it, then they're not going to keep honing that skill, right? So we need to make sure that we're encouraging them so that they're always challenging themselves so that they can continue to grow and learn more things. Um, so that's something I would want to make sure you understood. And the other thing is modeling reading at home. Parents are the primary teachers of their children, and your children are going to be just like you. And the funny thing is that our phones, they look like little handhold game devices. It doesn't look like you're reading when you're on your phone reading. And so you need to show that you're reading from a book, because chances are your children are going to be at school reading from a book and not from a phone. And so you need to model that it is very normal to be reading from a book or a magazine or from a newspaper or from something real. Um, and so that is something that you would it's we've moved so far away from the IRL, right? And we're so digital that it doesn't even click that our children are watching us on our phones and thinking that we're playing games. Because when we hand the phone over to the child, it's usually some kind of game or gamey type of app. And so they just assume that we're always playing games. I had a student one time, this was an elementary student, said, Miss Melissa, I cannot wait to to grow up and I want to be just like you. And I said, and I was so touched and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing. What about me? Are you interested in being like?" And she's like, "Well, I see you playing games on your computer all the time." And I was so heartbroken. And so it was but it was a reminder that I also myself, I needed to do things IRL in real life and not just on screens. So, so just keep that in mind. Making reading fun. So there's a lot of really fun things that you can do. When they first learn how to read, they're gonna want to read everything, and that it's a really, really exciting time, or it can be. When they are in the car, they're gonna read every sign. When when they're at the restaurant, they're going to try and read the whole menu. So it's a really exciting time, but creating opportunities for them to keep that reading, like getting one of those highlights or National Geographic for Kids subscriptions, so it comes in the mail for them. That's exciting. People don't really eat cereal anymore. Unfortunately, the cereal industry is kind of um, gone a little awry, but the cereal boxes used to be a really great place for children to learn how to read because they had all of these things on the cereal boxes. But if there's something like that in the morning when they're eating, that would be something. And then games that require reading. There's a lot of like role-playing games that require reading as part of the game. There's a lot of like family game night board games that require a lot of reading. So those are other fun ways as a family you can make reading opportunities for the new reader. The other thing is finding the right books. So now we've moved past the Bob books and we're looking at other books. Um, it's really important, well, two things. One, it has to be, or it should be, it's best if it's in your child's interests. Um, Especially when they're under third grade. After third grade, it could be, well, you just got to do it. But before third grade, I would say when you're really trying to establish good reading habits, making sure that it's within their interest, it would be really, really important. The other thing that I would say is if you open up the book to a random page and you just ask the child to read the words on that page out loud, and if they struggle with more than 5 words, it's too challenging. It's too challenging and it's just going to be frustrating and you're going to go backwards on it. So just say, this this book, this book isn't ready yet. It will be pretty quickly, I'm sure, but not yet. So I would suggest finding another book that has less than 5 challenging words on the page for your child. So the thing is that like I said, reading, it's a tool. It's not intuitive at all. And so it's not, it's like riding a bike in a lot of ways, right? Like it's hard. It's not, you gotta, it's not easy. It's really not. And so putting your child, if you were to put a child going uphill or on the street right away without giving them the opportunity to be able to fail safely, it's just, it's going to create a lot of frustration and they're going to turn away from it. And so just keep that in mind. Um, and I would use librarians. They're really good at finding the right books for your child. They really have in their brains all the different books and what they'll match them up with your child's interest and their readiness. So they're very, very good at that. And that is my whole presentation.